on me, Big Daddy, come on.
Yeah, 10-4, Mama Bear. For sure. By golly, it's clean clear to Ottawa. Come on.
Yeah, it's 10-4, Big Daddy, and yeah, we definitely got to the front door good, buddy.
Mercy sakes alive. Looks like we got ourselves a great big Canadian convoy.
It was all that we heard January 23rd on the highway side by side, as we stand together like one big family and we ain't got nothing to hide. We're heading for Trudeau on our mission to freedom, about a mile from his parliament town. I said, Big Daddy, this is Mama Bear, and I'm about to put my hammer down. Cause we got us a Canadian convoy, we're rocking through the night. We got us a Canadian convoy, ain't she a beautiful sight? Come join our Canadian convoy, ain't nothing getting in our way. Come on, join our Canadian convoy, even though it's from the USA. Convoy. By the time we rolled into Ottawa, we thousands of trucks and all. And ain't no roadblock gonna stop us, and we line up wall to wall. Yeah, them supporters are thick as bugs on a bumper, and we got crowds to cheer. I say calling on trucks, this is where we're stuck, and we're about to fight for freedom right here. Cause we got us a Canadian convoy, we're rocking through the night. We got us a Canadian convoy, ain't she a beautiful sight? Come and join our Canadian convoy, ain't nothing getting in our way. Come on and join our Canadian convoy, even though it's from the USA. Convoy.
Yeah, you wanna give me a 10-9 on that, Big Daddy? Perfect, Big Daddy. You're real close. Yeah, Trudeau is hiding in his den. Mercy sakes, Big Daddy. Guess you better come a little closer then.
Well, we rolled up into Ottawa like a rocket slid on rails, and we stuck together like Trudeau's sheep, and we'll leave them there to wail. By the time everyone gets to Ottawa, Trudeau might be on a trip so far, he'll be hiding like a cowardly son of a bitch, and so will all of his guards. There'll be armored cars and tanks and jeeps and rigs of every size, but the Parliament building may be empty, but choppers will fill the skies. Now we'll all line up and fight for our rights with all our screaming trucks, and with all of our supporters, we ain't giving up. We ain't giving up.
Yeah, Big Daddy to Mama Bear.
Yeah, 10-4, Mama Bear.
Listen, you wanna give a big shout out to Trudeau?
Yeah, tell him we're on time, just like dynamite, and he's gonna need all the help he can get.
Well, he didn't respond because he's probably gone on a vacation hiding this time, but he's got to return or he's gonna get burned because he's run out of time. I said this message is for Trudeau, and we ain't going home. So you better come back, you son of a bitch, and give us back our freedom. Cause we got us a Canadian convoy, we're rocking through the night. We got us a Canadian convoy, ain't she a beautiful sight? Come and join our Canadian convoy, ain't nothing getting in our way. Come on and join our Canadian convoy, even though it's from the USA. Convoy.
10-4, everyone. What's your 20?
Ottawa, we will know what to do with all of them for sure.
Well, mercy sakes, good buddies. Way back and out of here. So let's keep Trudeau and his sheep in line. For we will all prevail. We'll rid this mandate one way or another and watch this damn ship sail. Hell yeah.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's Chris here from the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta. That place there. If you don't mind, please let us know where you're watching from. I always am curious how far and wide these podcasts go. They used to go all the way around the world. Now we have sometimes, a few people from a different continent watching, but it's always interesting to see what kind of reach there is still these days in the era of censorship here in Canada. So, the $1 million question, probably what's on everybody's mind. Why is Chris wearing rainbow suspenders? That's a very good question. You may recall a few weeks ago, I posted a dessert on my Whistle Stop Cafe Facebook page. It was a dessert that I was actually pretty excited about. I bought it from Wholesale Club in Red Deer, where we get lots of our stuff from. And I thought when I saw it, man, the kids are going to love this. It was a rainbow colored cake, a 7-layer rainbow cake. It was just looked fantastic. I thought, you know what? They're going to love it. I'm going to get this for the kids. And in the back of my mind, I thought, wait a minute. What about all the hypersensitive people that are going to believe that because I have a rainbow cake, I must support the Pride movement? I thought, no way. The people that are supportive of me and the Whistle Stop Cafe and the freedom-loving people, they're more discerning than that. They would never think that. They've heard me speak before. They know where I stand on these things. It's not a big deal. But guess what? People actually said words like this. I will never support Chris Scott or the Whistle Stop Cafe again because he supports the Pride movement because he has rainbow in the cafe. Huh. Wow. Isn't that something? Obviously, it had nothing to do with that. Most of you folks who are watching, you know that I'm a Christian and I believe in God. And to me, the rainbow is not about a Pride community or any of that stuff. The rainbow is a promise from God that he's not going to flood the world again. That's what it means. I don't care what you think. If you want to hijack it for some other reason, whatever. It doesn't mean what you say it does. It's a promise from God, period. So as I was shopping in PV Mart, which I oftentimes do, I saw these amazing rainbow suspenders. And I thought, what better way to troll my own audience and make people angry than wear rainbow suspenders? So here they are, folks. The rainbow, God's promise to us that he's not going to flood the world again. And for those of you that no longer patronize my business, refuse to support my business and want to hurt me financially because I had a rainbow cake, thank you. Thank you for showing us all the content of your character before it was too late. Anyhow, on with it. Originally, I wanted to do a podcast tonight, a webcast, whatever you call it, a live stream on climate change issues, on the net zero stuff that we keep hearing so much about, on our CO2 emissions and environmental protections and those types of things. Well, since then, there's been some interesting things happen. For instance, one of them is the Bill 24, the amendments to the Alberta Bill of Rights passed. And now the internet has somewhat blown up about this. And yes, please post your comments about Bill 24, your concerns, your thoughts, or whatever. And I'm going to share my opinion. My opinion, like usual, rubs most people the wrong way. It rubs the left-leaning lunatics the wrong way because I believe in freedom. And I believe that we're all born with inherent rights and freedoms given to us by God that must be acknowledged by a government and affirmed by a government, not given to us. So, of course, I want to see documentation from government that shows us these things. These things need to be in our laws. We are a democracy in this country and in this province. We have our law, and our foundational values are based on Christian belief and teachings. And part of that is that God is the judge of judges, and all of our rights are given to us by him. So that pisses off the left for sure, because they don't believe in God for the most part. They are anti-God. They actually they condemn people who believe in God. People on our side are very, very sensitive to government and what's going on in politics and law and stuff like that right now. So if there's anything that they don't completely understand or that smells a little bit off to them, or a combination of two, they're very upset, and rightfully so. I mean, we were screwed over pretty hard over the last few years. Our rights were trampled on, right? So the proposed amendments to the Bill of Rights, the main thing that people were upset about was they included something similar to what we see in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Section 1 that allows the government to infringe on our rights if it's demonstrably justified in free and democratic society. You can Google that and read it yourself. I do have some experience with that because as a youngster in the schoolyard, I always heard people say and said myself, well, whatever, we live in a free country, don't we? And I grew up thinking that my rights were protected by these documents that they told us about in school. We were all celebrating it. And now keep in mind, I went to elementary school in the early 80s. Well, I guess through to the late 80s. So the Charter Rights and Freedoms Act, or the Constitution Act 1982, which encompassed the Canadian Charter Rights and Freedoms and the Bill of Rights, was kind of fresh. It was only, by the time I was in school, I mean, this piece of legislation, this act of parliament, was only, what would that have been, like 4 or 5 years old. So we celebrated this, and we were taught that we're free, and Canada is the best place to live because we have these things. Well, as I grew into adulthood and found myself in a position where I was not aligned with what the government wanted to do, and then eventually found myself in a position where I needed to engage in civil disobedience and protest, I realized things weren't exactly what I thought they were. We didn't exactly have these rights and freedoms because of this pesky Section 1 clause that said if it was that said we have those rights unless demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. And to me, that says, okay, well, maybe that's okay. Maybe if a court sees a bunch of evidence and the evidence says that my right to mobility should be infringed on, for example, I committed a crime, I need to go to jail. Well, I guess, yeah, that's probably justified that I don't have my mobility rights or something along those lines. I gave lots of examples in previous podcasts. I'm sure you folks can think of your own examples on those types of things. I didn't realize what it actually meant was that an activist judge appointed by a politician, the federal government, could exercise their activism by taking judicial notice of something. And that means they don't actually have to review any evidence. They just say, well, I'm going to take judicial notice of climate change because obviously climate change is happening around us. Or I'm going to take judicial notice of this pandemic because obviously this pandemic is happening around us. It meant that they didn't have to provide any evidence. It meant that I could say to a judge, hey, judge, my right to protest is being infringed on. I don't believe that what the government is saying is accurate. I want you to weigh the evidence. They say, well, I did weigh the evidence because the chief medical officer of health said that there's a pandemic and that they need to infringe on your rights. So that's that. That's the evidence. And I said, well, where's the evidence from the CMOH? Where's the data and statistics supporting what she's saying? There is no evidence. And that judge turned around and said, now I'm paraphrasing. This didn't happen specifically to me, but this is kind of the gist of it. The judge said, the CMOH is the expert and they are the evidence. So the very person that I was fighting in court or group of people were the ones telling the judge that we are the evidence and we need to do this. It was completely unfair. So Section 1 removed my charter rights. It allowed me to go to jail for protesting on my own property, amongst other things. Now, including something like that in the Alberta Bill of Rights, which didn't have that before, pissed me off immensely. And the thing that made me the most upset was that good men and women in our legislature, who I would call my friends, who I have a tremendous amount of respect for, and who say they have a tremendous amount of respect for me, couldn't see that that was a problem when they presented it in the first place. They couldn't see that they were doing exactly what Pierre Elliott Trudeau did when they enacted the Charter Rights and Freedoms and included that Section 1. They couldn't see that they were laying the foundation and the groundwork so that somebody like me, who was trying to fight for my rights and hold on to them, and using documents like the Bill of Rights, could be squashed because of what they were doing. They didn't get it. And that really upset me. How could they do that? Like, these people have been cheering me on for years. They've come to my cafe and broke bread with me and told me how much they respect my stand. And, you know, they really wanted to do something, but they couldn't speak out, those types of things. And they hope it never happens again. And then they tried to lay the foundation for it to happen again. Terribly upsetting. Now, I don't believe that was intentional. You may, I don't. Here's why. Our legislators have a very, very difficult job to do. They have to try and run government and do things and pass laws to our benefit, but also respect our rights. And they have to tread very carefully, because if they don't, some little cafe owner is going to file a class action lawsuit against them on behalf of every business in Alberta that they illegally shut down. So they have to be very careful. In this case, we've been demanding that government affirm our rights. We've been demanding that government put into legislation the affirmation of rights that we already know we have. And to some extent, they listened. They put in property rights, firearms rights, parental rights, some other great things, medical autonomy, amongst other things. And then they added that section 1. So we said, no, this isn't right. I actually wrote a paper on this. It was my best work that I could possibly do. I shared my experiences, my opinions. I backed it up with evidence. I sent it to government. I hope they read it. I don't know if they did or not. They came back to the legislature after meeting about this Bill of Rights, and they added some wording in there in this little section 1 clause. They basically said, well, unless these rights are guaranteed to you unless demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society with evidence. And there was some mention of proportionality in there as well. So basically they're saying, if we can provide evidence that your rights have to be infringed on, and the infringement is proportional to what we're trying to achieve, then we can do that. And some people have a huge problem with that. Some people don't. I don't have as much of a problem with that as you may think. Let's back up a little bit to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Constitution Act 1982. In the Constitution, the Canadian Constitution Act, there's a section in there that talks about what government has to do in order to infringe on our rights. And it's actually it's very clear that the government, the onus is on them to provide evidence in court that their infringement is necessary before they do it. That's in there. I know because I've read it. I had to read these documents as a matter of my survival. So that was always there. It's always been the case that if government is going to infringe our rights, they have to prove in court it's necessary before they do it. Now, what's happened is we've stacked statutes and acts and bills on top of that get them around that. In this case, the Public Health Act of Alberta includes things in there that allow them to get around that. It basically says, we're doing the work beforehand, and this law says that we can take massive steps and control things and infringe on rights before we go to court because it's necessary to maintain public health. That's how these things happen. So when I was fighting the government and trying to keep my restaurant open, one of the things I had always said is, if the government can prove that what they're doing is necessary, I will comply. If they can prove that me being open is going to kill everybody in the province, of course I'm going to close my restaurant. If they can prove that me having a protest is going to destroy democracy, okay, I'm not going to protest. I know my limits. I know my boundaries. I know my responsibilities as well as my rights in society. But they never, ever did that. So now our Alberta government has made amendments to the Bill of Rights. They've included more rights, affirmation of rights that we wanted. They've included this Section 1-esque clause that is better than it was in the first place, but not perfect. And I have some news for you, men and women. No piece of legislation will ever be perfect. I'll say that again. No piece of legislation will ever be perfect. The reason for that has something to do with the foundations of our democracy and our Western civilization. We are founded on Christian beliefs. We have a perfect king, a perfect ruler. We have a perfect judge who's benevolent and completely fair. But at some point in time, we decided to say, hey, you know what? We want a king down here. We want someone to rule us down here. We don't just want a king up in the sky. We want a man to be our king. And God's kind of like, well, that's pretty dangerous. You're kind of playing with fire there because you're not perfect. And if you're going to judge each other and rule each other, it's not going to be perfect. And there's going to be problems. And we said, yeah, well, we kind of need to see our king all the time. So we'd be more comfortable. And God said, okay, well, you can, here's your king. And ever since then, we've been ruled and governed by imperfect men and imperfect women. As good as some of the people in the legislature are, they are imperfect. They're flawed. just like you are, just like you, and just like I. So any piece of legislation that they enact is not going to be perfect. Now, going further down the road, some may say, well, it doesn't matter what the legislation is because what really matters is how judges interpret it. That is absolutely true. But I'll say it again. Our judges aren't perfect either. Our judges at times are activists. The judge that sentenced me to 2 years of probation, $30,000 in fines, 200 hours of community service, compelled speech, mobility restrictions, and I don't know, a couple other things that I can't remember right now. In his sentencing, he said, without evidence ever being presented of this, that I had caused irreparable and immeasurable harm to the people of Alberta. That judge was interpreting legislation, the Public Health Act of Alberta, and using that legislation to get me as a form of activism for what he believed in. Now, this judge, who owned a hotel chain and some hospitality stuff and had other business arrangements or whatever, probably benefiting tremendously from the COVID crap, he used his position to get me. He's not perfect. Now, if something happens in the future and we're forced to try and fight for our rights against the government, and we're holding this Bill of Rights up and we're saying we have these rights affirmed by you and you need evidence if you're going to infringe on those rights, we go before a judge, and that judge isn't perfect. That judge is going to be the one that interprets the law and passes judgment one way or the other for us or for government. And that will not change. To make matters worse, we don't even pick our own judges. In this system we call democracy, at the end of the day, it's a few men and women called judges who are going to be the ones that decide how democracy works. And we don't elect them. The federal government appoints them. Now, you tell me that a federal government and politicians in governing power don't have ulterior motives that aren't in the best interest of people when they're appointing judges. I'm sorry, but that just doesn't make any sense. So we can't control who interprets these laws. All the laws we pass in Alberta, we can't control who interprets that, except by influencing federal politics. Now, my fellow Albertans, how do we in Alberta influence federal politics? We elect MPs and we send them to Parliament, and they use their voice and they use their vote to vote on acts of Parliament, right? Who cares? We don't have enough of them. We cannot influence it. We can be part of a blue wave that's coming and sweeping the nation, where we're going to see the CPC make government and Trudeau ousted, of course. But when it comes to things like, you know, these very regional issues that we face, we cannot chart our own course. So for all of you who say we need to fix Canada, we need to fix Alberta, all of these things, if you're saying those things and ignoring the fact that Alberta cannot chart its own course, we cannot move towards our own future, we are at the mercy of the East and what the federal government does, you're ignoring those things. The only way we can fix these things is if we take full control of our destiny as Albertans, and we have the free and democratic Republic of Alberta. Now, if you have any other, if you want to try and debate me on that, we'll have to set up another whole podcast, because that's going to be a really long one. But I tell you, when I say these things, I don't say them or take them lightly. This is, this is some pretty serious things. And at the end of the day, this is where we're at. So we're going to do the best we can within Alberta politics. We're going to do the best we can within municipal politics. We're going to support the good changes and the good legislation that our legislators pass in this province. And we're going to hope that the judges who interpret these acts, these bills, and these pieces of legislation are going to be judges who are fair, balanced, and believe in the rights and freedoms of all people. But it's just a hope at this point. So, while I don't believe that the Bill of Rights that we just, the amendments that we just passed is perfect, I don't believe it's doom and gloom like many people say. I really don't. And if the people that think it's doom and gloom really thought it was doom and gloom, they would have read the rest of the proposed Bill of Rights that included a clause that said no part of this bill should be interpreted that anybody can exercise their rights and harm others. There was already a clause in the proposed Bill of Rights, the entire Bill of Rights that the Black Hats presented to government based on the Manning report, that had an out for judges. That any judge could have looked at that and said, well, you know what, the Bill of Rights isn't designed so that you can do whatever you want and exercise your rights while harming others, so we're going to infringe on those. It seems like everybody missed that. All the lawyers missed that. All the people on the internet that were shouting from the rooftops missed that. I didn't miss it, but I thought the Section 1 was more important until I really thought about what that means. What does it mean, the wording in there that says, unless you're going to harm others? Well, a judge could, technically, for example, say, well, Mr. Scott, your right to bodily autonomy, your right to medical autonomy is putting others in harm's way, so we're going to infringe that right. Nobody mentioned that. So if you really care about the future of this province, if you really believe in freedom, if you really believe in prosperity, then you'll get behind the organizations that are trying to move the needle and get, no pun intended with the medical autonomy thing, move the needle, that are trying to move the needle towards an independent Alberta. That is the only way. None of these groups, none of these politicians currently have any kind of lasting solution. They all have temporary band-aids that are going to make it a little easier, a little less bad for us in a very, very broken confederation. So on that note, I'm gonna leave that part of the conversation there. I will do my best to go through some of the comments on this stuff after and answer some questions or talk about these comments, but really I'm a little bit pressed for time. So amendments to the Bill of Rights, not perfect, not all bad. The people that worked on it are legislators. I really do believe they're trying to do their best. Oh, and here, I need to say this as well. We also asked for some specific legislation from our government. We said we want some parental rights stuff. We want to protect children from the woke agenda that's trying to chemically castrate them before they can vote. We want to help homeless people. We want to deal with mental health and addictions. We want to do all these things. We need laws to do these things. Most of those things that we asked for were at odds with the Alberta Bill of Rights that was proposed by the Black Hats. That is the specific reason why there's a clause in there that says that rights can be infringed with evidence. Because if that wasn't there, we wouldn't get the Compassionate Intervention Act. We wouldn't get the protection for children from the trans woke BS. And we wouldn't get the ability to help people with mental health issues on the street and stuff like that. It just wouldn't happen. And like I say, none of this is perfect. I had a conversation with a fellow that said, well, they can use it to tyrannize. Yes, they can. Which is why we need to be involved, which is why we need to outnumber those who wish to tyrannize us. That's the only way. We can't be lazy about it anymore. So now I'll end it on that for sure. So we've already talked about rainbows. We've talked about the amendments to the Alberta Bill of Rights. Let's talk about net zero. Let's talk about carbon sequestration. Does anybody know what that is? Net zero and carbon sequestration? They are anti-human ideas that abandon the principle of human flourishing. That's what they are. Now, this is going to be my official call out to anyone in our government who is pushing the net zero stuff, whether they're playing a game, trying to attract investment to Alberta on a foundation built of sand, which is the net zero shenanigans, or any of them that actually believe that climate change requires us to end using hydrocarbons in order to save the planet. So the entire premise is that carbon dioxide is warming the planet, and it's going to be catastrophic. And if we don't stop at all costs, end oil, we will destroy the planet. We're going to all die. The planet will be uninhabitable. That is complete malarkey. First off, if you bother to look at our recent history, like basically since the Industrial Revolution, our use of fossil fuels, I hate calling them that, they're not fossil fuels, our use of hydrocarbons has been steadily increasing and has never slowed down, except for COVID, of course. We've always needed more energy, not less. As we used more energy, we started with coal and oils and things like that. Our quality of life went through the roof. Our length of life went up. We became more productive. We invented more. We thought about more ways to deal with situations, and life got significantly better. I thought of this as I was building a storm window in the basement of this 100-year-old house that I live in, listening to the hiss of the natural gas in the 1927 Gurney hot water boiler that heats my house. I thought, that boiler, when it was installed in this house, that would have been like life-changing for the inhabitants. They went from needing to heat with this fireplace back here or on the cooking stove to all of a sudden they have a hydronic system that heats the entire house through these cool radiators that weigh 5,000 pounds. So they would go down there, they would shovel coal or shovel wood into this boiler, and the boiler would heat up the water and warm up the house. Wood was great, but that was a lot of work. When they started using coal, that was a huge thing because the heat content was higher. They had to shovel less, so they had more time to do other things. But when natural gas came, imagine how much time is freed up when you have natural gas flowing right into your home, heating your house. We take it for granted. But not that long ago, people needed to shovel coal or spend hundreds of hours a year dealing with one resource or another, coal or wood or whatever, to make sure that they didn't freeze to death. So what did we do with all that other time? Well, we invented things. We produced more. We grew more food. We did all sorts of great things. Our quality of life went up because of hydrocarbons. It's been like that across the world since we started using hydrocarbons. Right now, it's estimated that about 2 billion people on the planet, they live in what we would call empowerment. We have access to, I dare to use the word cheap, but accessible energy for our day-to-day lives. We can put gasoline in our cars. We heat our homes with natural gas. We cook with natural gas. My dryer runs on natural gas. We don't have to gather a bunch of things to do the things that the natural gas does. It's amazing. We can turn on a light switch. I can turn on my computer. We have electricity, until we start shutting down coal plants and trying to use wind and solar that need 100% backup from other energy sources, but that's another story. But my point is our quality of life and our way of life got way, way better. We developed medicines from hydrocarbons. We developed plastics, which have led to huge, like monumental increases in our quality of life. So what I'm getting at here is that since we've started using hydrocarbons, there have been benefits that we don't even think about. Did you know that oil, like mineral oil from the ground, saved the whales? We used to hunt whales and render their blubber down so that we could put lanterns in our homes. We used to render sheep fat and burn it and make candles and burn the candles and poison everybody with arsenic, just because that's in that, by the way. But now we don't have to do that. We flick a switch and a light comes on. Things have got way better. And in turn, we've also warmed the planet a little bit. Yes, that's true. Historically, since the Industrial Revolution, we've warmed the planet by about 1.5 degrees. Has it caused catastrophe? No. Has it caused droughts, fires, floods? No. Those things have been happening for millennia, at least from the historical record we can see. But what we have done is we put ourselves in a position where we can manage those things. There's been climate catastrophes for thousands of years, since the beginning of time. As a matter of fact, remember the rainbow? Well, that was a climate catastrophe, was it not? 40 days and 40 nights of rain, water covering the entire earth, if you believe. So we have these climate disasters, and even 150 years ago, do you know how many people died from them? about 18 million people per year died from climate-related disasters. You can look this up yourself. Do you know how many people, or wait, maybe it was 12 million. You better look it up because I might have my millions numbers wrong. But here's the important part. You know how many people die now in this day and age from climate-related disasters? Globally, about 18,000 per year. So we went from millions upon millions upon millions of people dying from climate-related disasters to less than 20,000. I would say that's a huge benefit. I would say that our ability to harness energy and use energy in all forms, including machines to help us do tasks, has helped us to deal with these disasters. If there's forest fires, we dispatch helicopters. We bring out massive pumps. We move amazing amounts of water. We do all sorts of great things. If there's a flood, we take trucks and we build dikes and we can fill sandbags and all these things at a record pace that we could never do before. And we can deal with these climate disasters. But you know what these climate alarmists never talk about is that they only talk about we've warmed the planet by 1.5 degrees. And at this trajectory, we're going to have warmed the planet by 9 degrees within 30 years or 40 years or whatever. That's all a bunch of malarkey as well. If you go and you look at the International Panel on Climate Change, from their own numbers, they estimate somewhere between another 1.5 to 3 degrees. Now, even at worst case scenario, if we warm the planet by 3 degrees, by using more energy and more hydrocarbons, we have the ability to deal with any kind of climate disaster resulting from that, if there was a climate disaster going to result from that. If we stop using oil and gas, all of the sudden, billions of people can no longer heat their homes because you can't heat with solar, sorry. All of the sudden, all of these things we take for granted, our increased productivity, our increased access to food, all those things, they start to disappear. And we slide back into an era where, you know, instead of tens of thousands of people dying from climate-related disasters, all of the sudden, now it's back into the millions. These 2 billion people who are empowered right now, taking great care of the environment, by the way, because they have more time to do that, no longer do that. Now they're fighting for resources. They're fighting for energy. They're using up the time that they could be using to improve the world to gather resources to get their energy. They never talk about that. We never hear our government here talk about that. They say we can meet net zero targets by 2050. And I say, yes, of course we can. We can meet net zero targets. We can actually make it look like Alberta is carbon neutral, that we're all these things, and we can attract net zero technology to our province. But it's all bullshit. It's based on a lie. And why in the world would Albertans even consider building a future based on a lie? Okay, yeah, let's bring in $40 billion of green investment into Alberta because we're leaders in carbon capture, utilization, and storage. We're leaders in carbon sequestration. We're leaders in net zero technology. Well, when people like me and people like you blow the lid off this narrative in the coming years, what's going to be left? A great big economic hole. I don't want to see that. Oh, I just heard it. I just heard somebody say carbon dioxide traps heat, and it is exponential because the more carbon dioxide we have, the more heat is trapped, and the more... Stop. Just stop. Let me explain something to you. Do you know why carbon dioxide traps heat? Do you know why it's called a greenhouse gas? Actually, let's back up. Do you know what the most prominent greenhouse gas in our atmosphere is by 80%? I'll wait. No, I'm not going to wait. It's water. Water is by far the largest driver of climate change or heat in our atmosphere. It absorbs more heat than carbon dioxide. There's a few others. What do we got? We got carbon dioxide, CO2, right? Water, H2O, methane, CH4. That's another, what we call a infrared absorber. That's what these things are. That's why we make this greenhouse effect. It's not actually like a greenhouse that has a piece of plastic on it and the sun's rays are trapped. What happens is these infrared absorbers absorb that heat from the sun. And I've actually heard some people, even in our government, say, well, at this trajectory, if we keep along this line, it's going to hockey stick and it's going to go out of control. You remember the tipping point with David Suzuki? That's what he said. I thought David Suzuki was a scientist. Apparently he's not, because the way an infrared absorber works, it works on a diminishing return. You have all this energy from the sun shining down on the earth. These infrared absorbers are absorbing the heat energy, and then it's already absorbed. So then the remaining infrared absorbers are absorbing heat from less of a heat source. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's like if the energy from the sun to the earth it's finite, it's measurable. It's not increasing or decreasing. Well, I mean, it does, it fluctuates a little bit, but for the purposes of this conversation, we're just going to consider it steady. So if there's that amount of heat and it's being absorbed, it's like you're pouring water onto some sponges. Well, the first sponge takes a bunch of the water and then less water is there for the next sponge. So the idea that there's a tipping point from carbon dioxide is absolutely ludicrous. But that's just one of the pieces of science that the climate alarmists and the net zero proponents completely ignore. And they ignore it every time. So not only are these people, including our own government, ignoring the fact that increased hydrocarbon use and increased carbon dioxide emissions have contributed greatly to our quality of life and made things much, much better, they're also ignoring basic fundamental science, like what I just mentioned about infrared absorbers, and they're passing policy about it, or based on these things. Now, this freaks me right out. If we continue along that trajectory, we're going to go backwards. It's going to be bad for people. Very bad. I wish I had saved a comment somebody made about this. You know what? I can't do two things at once. I'll try and bring it up later on, but maybe not now. So this whole idea it's just unreal. It's based on a lie. It's not grounded in fact or scientific evidence. And yet we're moving towards that. Why? And if we're not moving towards a better future, because our future is way better than it was before we started using hydrocarbons, we don't have a replacement right now. Solar and wind are not a replacement. The only possible replacement is nuclear. And for nuclear to take over the entire load from what we get from oil and gas right now, I think the number is you'd have to build 4 nuclear power plants every day until 2030 or 2050, pardon me, to completely stop using oil and gas for energy production. That's a big, big number. But it's not as big as our other energy use. So that would deal with electricity. What about our other energy? What about home heating and cooking and all those things? Do you know how much of our energy is devoted to those things? Like burning hydrocarbons to create heat, whether it be industrial process or heating up your house or drying your clothes? 86%. 86% of all of our use of hydrocarbons is for heat. 14%, maybe it's 16 and 84. Regardless, it's a huge difference. 16% or 14% is for electricity. So even if wind and solar took over all of our electricity production, which they can't, they still could not even come close to dealing with industrial heat applications or home heat. So not only is it a stupid idea, it can't be done, even if we leverage nuclear. So what are our politicians doing? Our politicians are saying Alberta is going to be leaders in carbon sequestration and carbon utilization and storage, and we're going to attract trillions or billions of dollars of investment. So Alberta is saying that we're going to pull plant food out of the atmosphere, which arguably has caused 1.5 degrees or so of warming over the last 150 years, which has not increased our sea level, by the way. And for what? We sit on enough energy reserves in this province to power this country for, I can't remember what the numbers, it's like 1,000 years. In the 80s, we thought we were running out of oil. That's another argument from these climate alarmists all the time. We're going to run out of oil. I'll tell you this right now. We will not. We will not run out of oil, and we will not run out of natural gas. Alberta right now sits on enough natural gas to meet our needs for 1,000 years. It is a huge amount of natural gas. If you look at reserve maps, like I'm talking about natural oil and gas reserve, hydrocarbon reserve maps from North and South America North and Central America into South America, it's way bigger than we ever dreamed. 1980, we thought we were going to run out, and right now, like if you look at what we're sitting on in proven reserves, we will not run out. And our technology keeps advancing. Why does it keep advancing? Because we have machines to do work for us. We have tons of free time. We don't have to fight for our survival. Well, I mean, when it comes to energy anyway, we don't have to chop wood all day. We can think about things. We can invent things. We can make the world a better place. We can deal with climate emergencies or climate disasters because we use all this cheap, abundant energy. We're not going to run out. And Alberta has enough for like 1,000 years. It's so abundant in Alberta. If everybody knew how abundant hydrocarbons were in this province, you would be like absolutely livid at what we're paying. We live in a supply and demand world where our supply of energy in this province alone is so much that we should be paying the same amount for gasoline as they do in Saudi Arabia, which is like 30 cents a gallon. But of course, we're led to believe that it's a fossil fuel, it's scarce, we're going to run out, and you need to pay through the nose so people can get rich. And those same people that are getting rich off of this idea that this resource that we sit on is finite and we're going to run out, are the ones that are lobbying government for the carbon tax scheme so that they can get richer. You ever wonder why our big oil companies in Alberta were on board with the carbon tax? Because it was economically beneficial for them. Do you think any petroleum technologist or petroleum engineer worth their weight in oil is going to say our resource is finite, we need to shift to something else? They're not. We're constantly discovering new reserves. We're constantly discovering new ways to access existing reserves that we couldn't access before. And yet these oil companies, these big oil tycoons, are on board with the carbon tax bullshit because they're getting richer. You pay a carbon tax, they get a carbon credit when they build a friggin' windmill. You pay a carbon tax, they get a carbon credit when they do something that benefits them, like build a carbon dioxide pipeline from Fort Saskatchewan down to Chigwell, Alberta, to repressure existing oil reserves, increase their oil production on the taxpayer dime. We paid for half that pipeline. That pipeline exists. There is a carbon dioxide trunk pipeline that moves carbon dioxide from Fort Saskatchewan down around here where I live. And these oil companies here use that carbon dioxide to inject into their reservoirs and repressurize depleted reserves to increase their oil production. So that carbon dioxide that's saving the planet is helping us pull more oil out of the ground. And you paid for half of it. It was billions of dollars. And that oil company is benefiting tremendously. So why would they ask for this? Because it makes them money. And because people are too stupid to see through it. Well, I'm going to take a quick look at the comments here. Oh boy, it's heated. It's heated. Oh, Jake, that's a really good point. Jake says, can you address naturally occurring causes of climate change, such as volcanic activity, solar variability, cosmic events, and ocean currents? Yeah, of course. Of course I can. I'm not going to give you any numbers. You folks are going to have to Google this yourself. But one of the things that I did when I started hearing things like, we're destroying the planet by doing this, or we're destroying the planet by doing that, we're causing catastrophic global warming by this or that, or Fukushima is, did I say that right? Fukushima? Fukushima is going to kill everybody with radiation. Well, the first thing I did was I Googled how much naturally occurring radioactive material is in the ocean. Google that, and then look at what Fukushima put out, and you'll realize that that was a bunch of BS hype as well. Yeah, bad. Yeah, dangerous. Yeah, we got cleanup to do. But in the grand scheme of things, it did nothing. There was no giant orange wave that was coming towards North America. No, people were not using Geiger counters and finding starfish that were radioactive over here. It was not happening. Naturally occurring radioactive material is huge. So huge that if you realize what it was and you're scared of nuclear because of radiation, you'd be scared to go outside. Anyway, back to climate change, volcanic activity. Do you remember back when that volcano erupted and it grounded flights, it blanketed the atmosphere for quite a while? Do you remember that? Well, there was a lot of sulfur dioxide in that. And the planet actually cooled because we had this blanket of solar reflecting material, sulfur dioxide. What also came with that was a crap ton of CO2. And what else is one of the major drivers of global warming? Water vapor. And this happens in nature all the time. Our oceans seep out hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil through naturally occurring faults and fissures in the ocean floor, way more than we ever spill. Solar variability, what I mentioned before, I said, well, the sun, for this conversation, we're going to say that it's steady. It's not steady. It changes drastically. It's almost like there's a climate changing on the sun year to year. It's a massive chaotic ball of fire. So of course it's going to be variable, and that affects our climate down here. Cosmic events, ocean currents, same thing. When these people do the climate models that tell us that the Earth is going to warm 4 or 5 degrees in X amount of years, it's not science. I'll say that right now. These climate models are not science. All it is a computer being given a set of variables and doing some math based on those variables and spitting out a result. So it's a lot of guesswork, and those graphs can be manipulated to look like whatever they want. A graph can be shrunk so that it looks like, Al Gore did this, by the way, so that it looks like as our carbon dioxide goes up, the temperature is following it. But the funny thing is, if you zoom in on that, it's the other way around. Because of things like ocean currents, latent heat capacity of water in the oceans, solar variability, all those things. So there's a lot of other things happening within nature that influence climate more than we ever can. And if you don't believe me, just do a little digging on the statistics of forest fires, floods, hurricanes, those types of things across history. We have a pretty good idea of things that happen. We can do some cool things like take huge, long ice cores out of the Arctic and measure the amount of oxygen in the bubbles, and we can know what was going on in the atmosphere. We can look at tree rings from 1,000 years ago in some places and see when there was forest fires, those types of things. We have a pretty good understanding of history, and it's always been chaotic. Nature is chaotic. There's this premise that the climate alarmists base their arguments on, that nature is some perfect, balanced, benevolent and fragile system that's perfect, except for humans intervened and threw it out of balance, and now it's not perfect. That's not true at all. Nature is wild. It deals with problems in savage ways. Like when nature decides that there's too much dead wood in a vast area of forests, lightning causes a forest fire that burns hundreds of thousands of hectares. Poof, gone like that. That's nature. It's not man doing that. It's nature. It's been happening for thousands of years. When there's an ecosystem in that forest, it's impacted by that fire and it's completely destroyed. Human beings have this uncanny ability to fix these things and make nature better. We can control our climates in our spaces. We can live in places that are completely uninhabitable in nature. So the idea that nature is just perfect and we're in the way is backwards. Nature is certainly not perfect. It's not, what's the word? It's not steady, it's chaos. And we master it and we make it better. We grow things where those things couldn't grow without our intervention. We save panda bears who would not be able to survive on their own because they're lazy little bastards. We're not a scourge or a virus on the planet. We are what makes the planet livable. 1,000 years ago, we wouldn't be able to live in even half the places we do now, let alone comfortably. And we have made the world a better place by being here, by mastering our climate, by learning and thinking and inventing things. And the world is a better place. But the climate alarmists, they say that it's the opposite. They say that we're making everything bad. And that's completely untrue. Completely untrue. Here's a fun little tidbit for you. I didn't know this. The people who discovered how infrared absorbing gases would cause global warming, did you know that they were excited about this? They weren't alarmed. They didn't think this was a bad thing. If you go back, I wish I could remember the guy's name. I'll look it up maybe and I'll post it in the comments later. But one of these scientists that discovered this, he wrote an article and it basically said like, hey, by increasing the amount of carbon dioxide we're expelling, we're actually going to warm up the planet a little bit. And this is going to be wonderful. They're going to be growing oranges in Idaho. They're going to have, cotton in Seattle. Our ability to grow food and survive is going to be greatly increased. The planet is going to become greener because of this amazing global warming idea. And to make it even better, the global warming that we're going to cause through the infrared gas emissions, it actually tends to happen more in areas that are colder. So the Arctic, instead of being average of minus whatever it is, I don't know what the average is. Let's say it's minus 20. Well, it's going to be, minus 18 or minus 17. And Antarctic, where nothing grows and there's nothing there, instead of being minus 30, it's going to be like minus 28. It wasn't like, oh, the jungle or the desert in Saudi Arabia is going to get way, way hotter. Well, it actually doesn't work like that because of the way infrared absorbers work and the way our atmosphere is constructed. The warming happens more at the poles than it does in the equator. Actually, oftentimes none at the equator because of the properties of infrared absorbing gases. Now, I'm wondering, I know these things not because I'm just some expert or went to school. I only know these things because I've read books and I've reviewed stuff done by people who made this argument that we have a moral and ethical obligation to use more hydrocarbons, not less. The reason for that is, I said about 2 billion of us live in the empowered world. Well, there's 8 billion people on the planet. And there's I think something like 4 billion people still cook and heat their homes with either wood or animal dung. The quality of life they have, the air quality in their homes is completely horrible. Living in energy poverty means they have to fight for their daily energy sources and needs, and they don't have time to clean up their environment. That's why a lot of times you see those really poor countries that burn animal dung to cook on and still heat their homes with just wood or whatever. They're dirty because there's no time to deal with the environment. They're not thinking about the environment. They're not thinking about cleaning up messes because they're busy trying to survive. So those of us in the empowered world who enjoy all these luxuries, we should be trying to bring these luxuries to other people, especially knowing that overall, our quality of life has increased hugely. Global quality of life has increased. We've mastered climate. We can live where we couldn't live before. We have opportunity like never before. And we should be encouraging other countries to do that, not encouraging them to build useless solar and wind installations that don't meet their basic energy needs. We bribe other countries to do that. We bribe people or bribe countries that are living in energy poverty to start putting in solar and wind installations instead of exploring their gas and oil reserves. And we keep them in energy poverty. I don't think that's ethical at all. I don't think it's ethical at all to say that the billions of people that survive and live long lives because of energy from hydrocarbons should go back to not living long lives based on false premise. At one point, according to science, by the way, because science is important, the planet was much greener. We've found fossilized tropical plants in the Arctic. We know that at one point the Earth was the temperature was relatively similar across the whole globe, including at the poles. We know that we had way more water vapor, which is the most powerful infrared absorber greenhouse gas there is. We know we had more of that in the atmosphere. The planet was greener. Plants grew bigger. We had more arable land than we do now. And carbon dioxide was upwards of 2,000 parts per million in the atmosphere. We know that from the core samples I mentioned earlier. Our carbon dioxide right now is 400 parts per million. Dangerous levels for plant life is about 200 parts per million. So if the Earth was much greener and warmer in ancient history, and we had 2,000 parts per million, the Earth wasn't on fire, what does that mean for today? Well, where did all that carbon dioxide go, you might be asking? We weren't burning it. Some of you think we weren't even around. I think we were around from the beginning, but that's another conversation. We weren't accessing oil and gas reserves, but plants were absorbing carbon dioxide in their normal day-to-day lives. Animals were eating the plants. They were storing the carbon compounds in their tissues, and then they were dying, and then they were going back to the ground and becoming, in some cases, oil and gas. So a lot of that carbon dioxide that was at one time in our atmosphere when it was 2,000 parts per million is now underground, locked away in these amazing energy reserves that we can access. In Britain, they had a program where they were burning wood. They had biomass power generation. And I remember, this is maybe 10 years ago now, I remember asking, well, how is that net zero? How is that carbon neutral? They're saying that they're burning all these trees to make energy in these power plants, and they're calling it net zero. That doesn't make any sense. They make emissions. And the answer was, well, those trees at one point had ate the carbon dioxide, absorbed the carbon dioxide that was in the atmosphere. So all we're doing is putting it back. Oil and gas comes from organic matter. Therefore, the carbon in whatever compound was at one point in the atmosphere. It's stuck underground. Carbon dioxide is plant food. If we run out of it, we'll all die. Doesn't that mean we should be using it, fueling our lives, growing food, putting the carbon dioxide back where it belongs? We can't do that, because if we get to a certain point with carbon dioxide, it's going to be too late. It'll be the tipping point, and it's going to skyrocket. The Earth will light on fire by 2016, says Al Gore. Bullshit. Infrared absorbers operate on a diminishing return. There is no tipping point. Google it. Al Gore lied to you. Even the IPCC, this information is there. The theory of diminishing return on infrared absorbers is in IPCC paperwork, IPCC reports. As a matter of fact, if you go through some of that stuff, you'll find that a lot of the things that are in there, specifically papers that are written by companies that don't really have a reason to have a bias, they support all the things I'm saying. If you want to really dig into this stuff and be able to have a much more tangible conversation than what I'm doing right now, go on Amazon and buy Fossil Futures by Alex Epstein and read it. If you are a climate alarmist or a climate believer, a climate anthropologic climate change disaster believer, read that book. You will not believe in net zero by the time you're done. Alex makes all of these arguments and many, many more, providing evidence and scientific fact and all sorts of things to make his case. And he does it in a way that it makes you think about this a different way. It makes you look at how we're impacting our world in a different way. You realize that the people that believe in net zero, they're not actually after carbon dioxide net zero, because if they were, we would be doing things much, much differently. What they're trying to do is reduce our impact on the planet. And if you reduce, the only way to reduce human impact, I've said this before, is to reduce humans, because we cannot exist without impacting our environment. And I would argue that the impacts that we make on our environment, for the most part, at least when you take everything into consideration, are net beneficial. So buy the book. You'll have a much easier time digesting that than I did. So I'm going to go through the comments because it's already 10 after 8, which means that I only have 50 minutes to bedtime. And I'm going to have to wash my suspenders. So let's go through here. I see some people are commenting a lot. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. A bunch of good evenings. Thanks for letting me know where you're from. That's pretty cool to see where people are watching from. Yeah, Bonnie brings up some of the legislation we have coming up, which is why the Bill of Rights had that, what do you call it, reasonable limits clause in it. Oh, here we go. Jack, it was Jack Meov. Hi, Jack Meov. Why don't you use your real name? You have some good things to say. Why do you got to use a stupid name like Jack Meov? You think I don't see? Everybody sees it. Anyway, whatever. He says, in a secular democracy like Canada, laws are created based on everyone's rights, regardless of religious beliefs. Wouldn't basing laws on one religion risk alienating those who don't share the same beliefs, including people of other faiths or no faith at all? Personally, I don't care if they're alienated, not even one bit. A law and a society based on Christian values, if you want to base it on something else, no, I don't care if you're offended. The reason is Christian values say that there is something greater than us that we need to set our eyes on in order to have a hope of being anything better than we are. If we look inside ourselves for perfection and truth, we won't find it, and we're going to fail, which is why most legislation has problems. It's not perfect. Christian values say, above all, do no harm. That's the first maxim of law. Any religion that doesn't say do no harm, I don't want any part of it, and I don't care if they're alienated. Western civilization was built on Judeo-Christian values. Western civilization and the lives we live today, the places that we've built so that people from all over the world can come and be free and have rights, were built on Judeo-Christian values. If they want to have laws based on other values, they can stay home in the shitholes that they live in, and they can continue to be tyrannized by people who don't believe in do no harm. So, laws are created. Laws aren't created based on everyone's rights. Everyone has rights. Laws have to be created to respect those rights. They're not created on religious beliefs. For instance, none of the laws that I've mentioned or we've talked about here have anything to do with religious beliefs at all, except for they're based on the premise of do no harm, love your neighbor, those kind of things. So sorry if people feel alienated or offended because I believe in a foundation of law based on Christian values, you can be offended, and that's fine. You're free to be offended. Jack, if you don't mind, you actually posted something. I think you copy and pasted off ChatGPT regarding the climate change stuff. If you don't mind, could you comment that in the put that up in the comments here, because I really did want to talk about it tonight. I just forgot to bring it up. Phil, you're saying things that are completely ridiculous and not helpful to the conversation, but thanks for being here. Yeah, Jack again. Now what do we got here? Oh, they're home. Hello, family. Hi. How do we ever break free from the crown? Alberta independence. Hashtag all paths lead to Alberta independence. Every solution for every one of the problems that everyone mentions in this province, all could be solved through an independent Alberta. But people can continue to run around like chickens with their heads cut off, talking about other things because they feel it's a more popular opinion. Well, sorry, folks, you're wrong. All paths lead to Alberta independence. Oh, Jack's really giving her on this on the comments. So he says it's hard to take these lives seriously when they're so biased. Chris chooses what supports his beliefs while ignoring anything that challenges them. It's like he's more interested in preaching than having a balanced, thoughtful discussion. Well, I'm not really having a discussion. I'm sharing my opinions and my beliefs on my live stream. Are you saying that you would like to join me? Because if you want, I guess I could have you on one of these lives and you could share your beliefs and we'll talk about it. That would be a discussion. This isn't a discussion so much, although I guess we do call it a discussion, but it's not a discussion so much as a opinion piece. So there's that. Reinforce Alberta's firewall. Yes, all paths lead to Alberta independence. Where do we got here? More black hats. Hi, Zach. Yeah, any of you that say that I'm sleeping because I don't share your thoughts, you need to give your head a shake. I just do things a different way than you do. That's all. There was a Stop Cafe, Edmonton, Alberta. Interesting. I didn't know there was one. Wow. Steve says, could you comment on Danielle Smith's plan to fight Ottawa on the emissions cap? Yeah, great. I'm happy that Danielle Smith is fighting Ottawa on the emissions cap. Now I want to see her acknowledge that we need to be using more hydrocarbons, not less, and that CO2 is not a disaster, it's not destructive, and it's not against our future. I would like to see our government acknowledge that we need more CO2, not less. And actually, you know what? I'm even going to work on that. I'm going to try and get this information in front of our government. So wish me luck. For all you people saying that I should be talking about this or I should be talking about that in a rude and disrespectful way, piss off. You can do your own live, talk about whatever you want. I choose what I talk about. Tonight, I'll choose what I talk about. Tomorrow, nobody controls me, nobody handles me, and nobody owns me. If you don't like it, your hat is in the closet and you can take it to bed with you. Anyone who grew up knowing what living in a home without electricity, gas, no indoor plumbing was like is thankful for natural resources. Yes, I'm not quite old enough to know that, although I've been camping lots, and I can tell you, you sure spend a lot more time trying to stay warm than you do when you're at home. Time that could be spent inventing things to make your life better. Bonnie says, net zero is going out of vogue. It can't shrivel up soon enough. And she agrees. It's a lie and so much damage is being done because of it. The problem is we've allowed legislation and policy to infiltrate our society that encourages these activities. We've allowed reward for companies that are pursuing net zero goals in the form of monetary reimbursement and things like that, all at the taxpayer's expense. So I don't think it's going to go away as quick as people think it is, because there's a lot of money backing it. The only thing we can do is have these discussions and share our opinions and try and turn the tide and create the parade that the politicians get in front of. Until we do that, it's just not going to happen. Yeah, Jake talking about planet greening, of course. What do we got here? Some rudeness. I don't like rudeness. It bothers me. Whatever. Here's a great one. I like this one. Donna says, I don't understand why nuclear is considered clean energy. How can they say that when they have nowhere safe to put the waste and it not... something. Okay, so it's not structured in a way I can comprehend, except that she says, what about the next nuclear meltdown? The meltdown in Japan, I believe, is still going into the ocean. What is that doing to our ocean? Nothing. Who owns most of the oil companies now? Canada? I don't know. I think it's foreigners. Nuclear is absolutely clean. Nuclear energy, you look at the safety record for it, there's been 0 deaths. 0. Except for Chernobyl. Chernobyl was one that was a meltdown. It was nasty. Chernobyl happened because the safety system in that reactor was designed so that it would fail off instead of fail on. So when they had a problem, the safety system failed off and they had a runaway meltdown. There has never been an incident. Overall, over the course of history, nuclear has been the cleanest, least impactful source of energy that we have ever had. But the reason why it didn't take off is because this isn't about reducing CO2 emissions, it's about reducing impact. And nuclear has an impact, of course, because there's nuclear waste. But did you know that nuclear waste in the last 2 decades, I believe, we've actually been able to recycle it into new fuel for newer generation nuclear reactors. So even technology there is increasing and our waste is getting less. And I can't remember what the exact stat was for waste, but all of the waste that we've ever created using nuclear, if you stacked it on a football field, it would be only 50 feet high. That's not that much. That's manageable. We store it in containment things, we bury it underground, and it sits there for thousands of years. Imagine if we replaced every single ship, like transport ship, that runs on bunker fuel or diesel fuel or whatever. Imagine if we replaced all of those with small nuclear reactors. Imagine the amount of legitimate pollution that we would be preventing going into the atmosphere. The net benefit of using nuclear, go away, is way higher than any risk that we've ever seen. Phil, if you want to mention that stuff, do it on your own live. I'm talking about something else right now. I don't know why you got to be so rude. It's annoying. You're not giving anything to the conversation. Folks, if you want to learn about what Phil is harping on me to talk about, go to his page and watch his lives on it. It's very simple. Like I said, I'll talk about whatever I want to talk about. Yes, coal plants absolutely should be up and running again. I think, you know what? I'm going to have to do a live stream with Jack Meov. Do you guys think that Jack Meov should come on a live stream with me? He says I'm always wrong. And I really want to see where he's been digging and say that I'm wrong. What have I been wrong about? I'm ignoring overwhelming evidence of man-made damage to the environment. Okay. Have we damaged the environment by pursuing energy or existing? Yes, we have. Of course we have. But are we going to ignore all of the benefits? Are we going to ignore all of the good things that we've accomplished on this planet in the name of human flourishing and only talk about environmental damage? And specifically, what environmental damage are we talking about? Are we talking about smoke pollution? Are we talking about sulfur dioxide? Oh, wait, that's volcanoes. Are we talking about oil spills in the ocean? Oh, wait, our natural oil leaching into the ocean trumps anything we do by a factor of 1,000 every day. I don't know. I guess, Jack, you're going to have to come on a live stream. You'll have to use your real name, though, because nobody believes that your name is Jack Meov. There's literal garbage islands floating in the ocean. Just think about it for a minute. Yes, there are garbage islands floating in the ocean. You know where they are? They're in areas of the world that are living in energy poverty. They're in areas of the world that don't worry about cleaning up their messes because they're too busy gathering animal dung and wood to cook their next meal. Do we have garbage islands floating in Western civilization, in North America, in the United States, and Mexico even? No, we don't. Do you know why? It's because we have the ability to deal with the waste that we make because cheap, abundant energy. Those things, those major environmental disasters are in places that don't have energy like we do. So I would say that that comment about garbage islands floating in the ocean is actually part of the ethical argument as to why we should be using more oil and gas, not less. We should be empowering those nations, helping them develop their resources so that they can consider cleaning up their environment instead of using their time gathering their resources. Great. That's a great point for the ethical argument for using more oil and gas. What do you got here? Excess CO2 increases the acidity of the oceans. Reefs are dying. That's actually not true. Excess CO2 does not increase the acidity of the oceans. Do you know what happens as the oceans warm? They release CO2. Look it up. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it. You're ignoring the long-term impacts just to line your pockets. I'm assuming that's line my pockets. I'm not sure how that works because nobody gives me any money. I literally, this isn't a paid program. No one pays me to say these things. I just look at the world around me and share my opinions. So you know what? Even if, let's say that CO2 was increasing the acidity of the oceans, which it actually doesn't. And actually, that's kind of a poor statement anyway, because you're not actually increasing the acidity. The oceans aren't acid at all. What you're doing is you're reducing the alkalinity a little bit, but they're still a base, not an acid. So the whole argument, it's disingenuous to say that it increases the acidity. The oceans aren't acidic now. They're basic. They're just slightly less basic. And the thing about that is, if you're worried about that, wouldn't you want to be able to fix that problem? We can master almost any climate issue by using cheap, abundant energy. We could actually deal with those things. So, yeah. And if there's anybody that's lining my pockets for this, please give me a call tomorrow, because you forgot, and I could use that money. I actually hit a coyote in my Jeep the other day, and it put a piece of my valence through my radiator, wrecked my AC condenser. So now, and my bumper. So now my Jeep is sitting in the shop with the front end pulled apart, waiting on parts. So please, send me some of that pocket lining. I've cherry-picked information. I love cherries, but this information isn't cherry-picked. Again, happy to have you come on, and you can talk about these things with me face-to-face. It might be a great conversation. Probably not, though. Yeah, what else we got here? Yeah. Stone says, what a tangled web we weave as we practice to deceive. That is a true story. Say the name of the book again. The name of the book is Fossil Futures by Alex Epstein. You can find it on Amazon and read it. It's thick, but it's really good. And actually, the whole idea that Alex brings up is that we need to change the way we think about these things, and we need to start considering the whole picture rather than just cherry picking things like, oh, CO2 levels are going up, we're all going to die. Well, no, CO2 levels are going up, and as they've been going up, we live longer, and we have better lives. So if we bring them down, it would probably mean that our lives are going to get worse and we're going to live less. So we should probably think about that. What else? You're seeing comments I can't see. Is that because I missed the first hour? It depends on which platform you're on. I'm streaming to a bunch of different things: Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, X. And so you would only see the comments that are on those particular platforms. I think if you, I'm not sure how you could see them all. Maybe try Facebook, I guess. Climate change. Oh, here's a great one. Kathy, thank you. Climate change is real only in ways that are evolutionary, and nothing we do will change that. Weather cycles as it has for thousands of years. I would agree with that for the most part. Climate change is real, of course, and you would be really mistaken to assume that what we do here on the planet doesn't change anything. Of course it does. What I'm saying is most of the changes are for the better, And because of the changes that we're making, we can change things for the better even more. But climate change has been happening for millennia, since the dawn of time. And, actually, before the Industrial Revolution, what was that period called? There was an interesting period of warming and carbon dioxide increase. I'll have to look it up and maybe I'll post that too. But it was like thousands of years before we ever started using oil and gas, and CO2 went up and the temperature went up and CO2 also went up. And it had nothing to do with burning anything because we weren't doing that yet. How are petition numbers going? No idea. Define independence, ability to chart our own course as sovereign nation, not beholden to anybody. Mel says, first time here, Chris. Great podcast. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, Dale says that would be great to talk to Danielle Smith and her government about needing more CO2 and more oil and gas. Okay, let's do it. If you guys think that we should get this conversation to government, let's do it. I will. What are we going to do? Let's invite them all to dinner. Let's put on a nice event for them. Have a dinner, and we'll have a guest speaker to talk about these things. And then we'll maybe see if they'll sit down and talk to people within our government. I've seen events with Minister Rebecca Schultz doing this type of thing. I've seen the Premier do it. They seem to be willing to talk to people. So why don't we bring one of these speakers up and have them talk to our government? Is that a good idea? If you think it's a good idea, comment, and then let's put our money where our mouth is, because it's going to cost some money to put this thing together, but we can do it. And you know what? Maybe I'll even do the dinner. Yeah, that'd be great. What are we going to call it? What are we going to call it? I don't know. Comment that. I bet you Jack Meow has a good idea of what we're going to call it. What else we got here? I pump CO2 into my grow room because CO2 levels are too fucking low. Yes, they are. Most, if not all, commercial greenhouses increase the CO2 levels in their growing spaces because there's not enough CO2 to grow the amount of food that we need right now. So they increase it artificially. Stone, you may know this, but I'll tell the rest of you folks. One of the interesting thing about mushrooms is that mushrooms breathe oxygen and expel CO2. So if you are a cannabis grower or a small vegetable grower, you can actually get bags of mushrooms that you put in your rooms, and overnight they increase the CO2 concentration and help your plants out. Pretty cool, right? It's almost like it was designed perfectly like that. The Yukon Assembly refused to swear allegiance to the king. This was on Global News. Reroute this morning, the hole in the atmosphere in Antarctica. Yeah, that was pretty cool. I've always wondered that. I considered becoming an MLA at one point, and then I thought, do I really want to swear allegiance to the crown? I suppose I did at one point because I was in Air Cadets and we did those oaths of allegiance and things like that. But I don't know how comfortable I would be doing that now. I mean, the king was the plaintiff in a lawsuit against me because I stood up for my rights. Not real big fan of that guy. Anyway, it's cool. I think Jack's gone. I really hope not. I really hope he comes on the show. That would be great. Who should we get to moderate it? Let's get Carrie Lambert to moderate it. The environment will squish you like a bug whenever it wants, no matter what you do. That's true. But we have this wonderful ability to harness massive amounts of energy and deal with environmental disasters and deal with nature when it comes calling. Human beings are pretty cool. If giving your opinion is causing distress to a couple people, I might actually pay to have a front row seat. Well, I tell you what, if I was getting paid to do this stuff, I could do a lot more. Right now, I have to choose between family time, which I'm foregoing right now, and my supper, and choosing between that and doing a podcast, or I have to choose between going to work and cooking in the kitchen or doing a bunch of research and reading books so that I can have these discussions with people. So yeah, maybe I'll sell tickets. What else we got here? Chris, does your show have a call-in number? No, I used to do that. Haven't done it in quite a while. Again, this is all just me literally in my living room with my drum set behind me. And I don't have a production team. I don't have anyone to man phones, nothing like that. That's the result of a zero budget podcast. Gee, I guess dinosaurs used too much fossil fuels and caused climate change. Actually, that's a good point, because there was a period in time when there was some catastrophic climate change caused by increased methane emissions. As you know, dinosaurs ate a lot of meat, a lot. And the vegetable eating dinosaurs ate a lot of vegetables. Needless to say, they all got a lot of protein. And I tell you, they farted like my girlfriend after chili. It was horrendous. They were farting so much, those dinosaurs back then. They drove the level of infrared absorbing gases in the atmosphere so high that it actually caused a meteor to hit the planet to wipe the dinosaurs up. Yeah, that's right. The universe smelled the Earth, thought the Earth smelled so bad because of the dinosaurs, it literally hit us with a meteor. So that's what killed the dinosaurs, I think. And that is pretty much it. Nikki Hurley says, what's up with the Bill of Wrongs? Nikki, thanks for being here for the last, as long as I can remember. Really appreciate you, even though sometimes we don't agree on everything. You say the Bill of Wrongs. I don't believe it's all that wrong. I believe it's not perfect, but I don't believe it's as bad as people say it is. And the way I came to that conclusion was I said, basically, at the end of the day, if we try and use the Bill of Rights to stand up for our rights against government or something like that, it's going to be a judge that interprets the law and makes a ruling on it. So yeah, it could be stronger to protect us. If it did, then maybe it would be more difficult to do some of the legislative things we want to do. It's a balance, and some people don't like it. Some people do like it, but it's what we got. And now we got to move forward. And I certainly don't believe that we need to be throwing the baby out with the bathwater because government didn't do things exactly the way we wanted. We also have to remember that there was a lot of people on the other side of this that wanted things way worse for us. And they are also residents of Alberta who are participating in democracy. So I think at the end of the day, we got a decent bill, certainly not perfect. And only time will tell if that Section 1 clause that includes words like proportionality and evidence is going to strengthen our freedoms and rights or cause them to decay. But I can tell you this right now. I own my rights. They were given to me when I was born. No man and no woman is going to take them away from me. I will exercise them until the day I die. And if that means that I have to be offside with the government and go to jail because of it, I will. I've done it before. I'll do it again. Just because there's a consequence for me having my rights doesn't mean that I don't have them. No piece of paper, no judge, and no government is ever going to take my rights away. I just might have to sit in a jail cell while I still have them. That's the way it is. So I can tell you, if there is another thing the government wants to do, like say Bill C-293, which we're fighting, by the way, and they want to infringe on our rights, I'm not bending for nobody. So hopefully most of you are with me, because if we bring enough people and we show up, we will win. If we bring enough people and we show up, we will put good people in government, we will make good laws, and we will change the world for better. So I'm not really concerned. I've met thousands and thousands of people over the last few years who are very supportive, who believe in freedom. I know that they'll support good legislators and good politicians, even though they're not perfect, and we'll just continue to do the best we can. And if some of us have to sit in jail because we stood up for our rights, well, so be it. I guess we just got to make sure that we take care of each other when we're out. Speaking of out, I'm out. Thanks for watching. I'll try and get back sooner rather than later. Maybe we'll have a little live from the garage tomorrow, and I'll show you the disaster that is my Jeep just from a little coyote. By the way, I feel really bad about that coyote. We smoked that guy. Like, man, it was bad. Like, he caved in my AC condenser and my radiator, ripped my bumper off. Poor little guy. Actually, I just had an interesting thought. That was pretty horrible that I hit that coyote. My impact on nature was swift, it was severe, and it ended that animal's life. But I want to remind you of something. Left to nature, that coyote would have very, very likely had a very horrible death. The transition from life to death in the natural world is most of the time, the vast majority of the time, horrible. For instance, when coyotes get old, they get weak. Oftentimes, animals will eat them while they're still alive. They get disease, they get mange, their fur falls out, and they get weak. Their pack leaves them behind, and they freeze to death. That's their transition from life to death. The transition to death from that coyote for me was instant. No pain, no nothing, just gone. So while that's a very horrible thing to have happen, nature is no prettier. Our impact on this planet is by far much more civilized and gentle than what nature is. And knowing that, I would say it's important that we have the ability to manage nature and exist within it. Because if we don't, our demise will be swift and it won't be pleasant. Good night.